Hello there, Friday class. In this video, we will begin drafting our new stories. You should have completed the entire front of your graphic organizer by now, and the first two events on the plot mountain on the back should also be created. We're going to go over what a good plot looks like, and then I will also lead you all through drafting a good hook, a good second and third paragraph, a good background paragraph, and then a transition into your problem paragraph. Just to review, on the front side of your graphic organizer, which you should all have out in front of you right now, and the substitute can pause the video if you do not, we're going to be looking at the front now. You should have listed 3 details that make your story science fiction or fantasy. I will be checking this when I see you again. Now, the 3 details that make your story science fiction need to be distinct or different. You can't list the same detail with different words. So, for example, you can't say they have a time machine and then say they travel through time. Obviously, those are too similar. You need to have 3 distinct details that make your story science fiction, or 3 distinct details that make your story fantasy. You could look at these examples here on the screen. Fantasy stories have a battle of good versus evil, but you should be specific and say what this battle versus good versus evil is. Don't just write good versus evil, that's too vague. Okay? And you can look at these examples too for ideas. Remember, you're supposed to choose a year if you did sci-fi. If you did sci-fi, look at that part of your front of your graphic organizer. The year should make sense based on this criteria that we went over last week. You can go back and watch this video if you want to see that again. In fantasy, of course, if you're writing a high fantasy story, your story takes place in a whole different world. And so you're going to have a whole different year system. You shouldn't use our world's year system if you are writing your story in a high fantasy, whole separate world. They should have their own system of years. If you're doing low fantasy, you could pick a year according to your pleasure, because low fantasy takes place in our world and just has some fantasy elements. You're supposed to draw a map, and your map should have distinct elements or parts of it. It should be very detailed, and of course it should be in color. The same is true for the technology. If you drew the technology, that also needs to be in color when I check your graphic organizer next week. So that would be the front, okay? Both stories should not have violence, and you should feel free to incorporate your values, your faith into your story. Let's look at an example plot, okay? I'm going to tell an example story so we can see the parts of the plot and review what yours should look like. Everyone should be looking at the plot mountain on the back of your graphic organizer. So pause the video, please, substitute teacher, if the students are not ready to do that. All right, so as we look at the back of our graphic organizer, everyone first look at your exposition event. Your exposition event should clearly show your main characters doing something. You shouldn't just say who they are or where they are. Check if you have that. If you do, put a check mark. If you don't, add it. Also, I would like it if your exposition box reveal the setting of your story. My screen is kind of cut off here, but mine says Henry and his father Al were sailing on the sea. So we know the setting is the sea. And so I know as an author, when I describe the exposition, I need to paint a vivid image of the sea to my reader. I want my reader to be able to imagine everything you can see on the screen here. I want to open my story describing how there was the smell of salty seawater coming over the deck of the ship. And I want to describe the sounds of the setting using all the senses that I can. I'll describe the sound of the waves crashing against the hull and the sounds of distant seagulls searching for fish. So there I'm describing sound, smell, and maybe I would describe how the sun was just beginning to set or arise at the beginning of the story. I just want to paint a vivid image of my setting for my reader. See if you wrote the setting down in your exposition box, and if you did not, we're going to add it right now. You should also think about what external traits of your characters you want to describe, because we're using the same rubric in our Quarter 2 story. So you should still be describing what your 2 main characters look like in your exposition. The teacher is going to pause the video now, and you're going to add those details to your exposition box if you have not already. It should only take you a couple minutes to write down a little bit about what the setting is like in this event and what the characters look like. All right. The problem is when the story really gets started. It's the crisis that the characters have to overcome, or the goal they're trying to overcome in order to solve or achieve their goals. The problem in my example story here is that a giant squid emerges out of the sea to eat them. However, he did decide to spare them if they were able to free his brother, Squilliam, from the dungeons of the abominable starfish. So this is quite a crisis, and our characters are off to try to save his brother. I need to have 3 rising action events. There are 3 steps they're going to take to try to solve their problem. Each of these events should be enough to write about 3 paragraphs enough, so they should all be very detailed and meaty. I required you to have the first 2 events drafted or pre-written by today, but you should have the rest of your plot pre-written by next week. I won't see you, if you're the Friday class watching this, I won't see you on the 14th because of the gala, but when I do see you again the next week on the 21st, you definitely need to have this all pre-written. My first Rising Action event is that they went to find Missy Mermaid and ask her for the magical power to breathe underwater. As an author, I'm thinking about how I'm going to add suspense, because I don't want to make that overly simple or easy for the characters, because if it's too easy, it's boring to the reader. I'll make the mermaid maybe ask them to solve a riddle in order to gain the power to breathe underwater. Once they've gained the power to breathe underwater, they went down to the Starfish City, and I would make that very eventful too. I would probably make them get chased by an evil shark, but maybe like a dolphin would help them, or a sea tortoise or something. So that way there's suspense in every single event. Every single event should feel like the whole story is going to come unraveled and the characters are going to fail. Because you want to add suspense to every single event. Always think about, how could I make this more challenging for my characters? Then they got hired as prison guards to gain access to the prison, and I'm thinking as an author that when I write that scene, I'm going to make it seem as though they're not going to get hired, they're going to get discovered for being phony, but at the last minute they're going to get the job. I always want to add suspense to every event, and you should too. The climax is that they snuck into Squilliam's dungeon and they were able to release him, but as they were trying to escape, they had to face off against the evil, abominable starfish, but were finally able to succeed. The climax is when the original problem is solved. Always remember that. You don't solve the problem in the resolution, you solve the problem in the climax. The following action is whatever they do next. In my story, they ride with Squilliam back to his brother, so it's very peaceful, and I'm going to have them summarize in their heads everything they did on their adventure. The resolution in my story is supposed to be a humorous one because they enjoyed a nice calamari dinner as a big group, and they all became friends. So that would be a plot, okay? So you should have your exposition and your problem event all pre-written, and now we're going to actually look at how to draft a good exposition and problem event. Alright, when you go to the Creative Writing Google Classroom page, you're going to see a new assignment. It's titled Quarter 2 Rough Draft. You're going to go ahead and open that, and then you're going to go to the top corner, you're going to click your document that I made for you. I am going to open up a random one. I'm going to open up one that hasn't been worked on yet. How about Annalise Yaldos? So she has nothing here, but I'm just going to go ahead and type something here as an example for you all. This is not obviously her story. Listen very carefully to how you want to do this, okay? We're going to do it step by step, and the substitute, please feel free to pause the video to allow the students to do this step, and then keep on playing it. Okay, guys, first thing you want to do is go up to the top corner. You double-click up there. It's going to say Title by Author. Go up there and change the name to whatever you want to title your story, and then write by your first and last name. Don't worry if you don't have your title all figured out yet. You could use what's called a working title. It's just a title you want to use for the time being until you think of a better one. Okay, now that you've given your story its title and you've written by author, listen carefully. Looks like it's preset at 11. You want it to be preset at 12. Then we're going to go ahead and we want to create our title on this page. Look at this button right here. This is the aligning button. Click it, then click Center Align. Don't try to align it yourself using the spacebar or the tab. It generally messes up the formatting and it's not going to be good if you do it. So click the center button and then increase the size to size 15. Your title could be in size 15 in any font you want. And I'm going to create a story here. It's going to be a fantasy story. It's going to be called The Dolphin Kingdom. Now that I'm thinking about dolphins. By, of course, Annalise Yaldo. Skip a line. Then you can either hit the backspace button, which will take you back to left align, or you can go up and hit this button again, and then hit the left align button. Now remember, you always want to begin each paragraph with the tab button. You indent your paragraphs using the tab button. The tab. Substitute can please pause the video to allow students to get to this step after they've written their title in size 15, author name in size 15, skip a line, go to the next line, hit tab, and then put the text back down to size 12 because your story needs to be written in size 12. Alright, we want to write our story in Arial, Times New Roman, or Cardo, professional looking font. We begin our story with a hook. I'm going to type some things here just for you to see it written out, but we want to begin our story with a good hook, and good hooks that I've gone over with you include dialogue, Ana, Vada, Pia, it's a word I really need to learn how to spell. I always spell it wrong. And also sensory language. Rich sensory language. I'm going to demonstrate all 3 different styles of hook in one introduction. So please just watch the video, kind of learn all these skills, and then imitate the one you like best. You can even use more than one style of hook. It's okay. You can use all 3 of these things. Yeah, you probably should. Maybe not onomatopoeia. That's a little bit more rare. I'm going to begin with dialogue. So in this story called The Dolphin Kingdom, we're going to have our dolphin princess and our dolphin prince are going to be hanging out, just swimming along, chasing after, what do dolphins eat? I'm not really sure. They're going to be chasing after turtles, playing tag, okay? He's so fast. That's how the story's going to begin. Now, I'm going to zoom in so you guys can see some things. You want to make sure you do your dialogue correctly right off the bat. Don't make a whole bunch of dialogue errors and then try to fix them later. Be very careful you do your dialogue correctly from the get-go. Quotation mark, capital letter, write what the character says, have a punctuation mark, exclamation point here, then a quotation mark. Okay? And then I'm going to name the character who's speaking, Princess Dolphia said, period. Some of you guys like to put quotation marks at the end of this, but you do not do that because you only put quotation marks around what the character said. So there's my dialogue. I don't like following up. If you start the story with dialogue, you shouldn't have another dialogue line right away. You should give the reader something else to imagine or visualize, so I'm going to continue the story. Dolphia strained her tail fin, causing a tail fin and wiggled her body, causing her to torpedo toward the tortoises. Tommy, the youngest of the tortoises, laughed. All right, so now we know another character, Tommy, the youngest of the tortoises. We also get to visualize Dolphia's external traits. She has a tail fin. She's wiggling her body. She's torpedoing through the water. This is an external trait. The reader can visualize what she looks like, and that checks a box. You need to describe the external traits of all your characters. Tommy, the youngest of the tortoises, laughed, so you can imagine his personality. He seems very jovial. I have a little paragraph here giving the reader something to visualize. I think that's important before continuing the conversation. Tommy said, you could also say who's talking before the quotation. So I'm going to write Tommy said, comma, quotation mark, you'll never catch us. We'll see about that, Prince Dolpho said. Okay, so I have this little fun beginning of the story. Princess Dolphia says something. I allow the reader to visualize what they look like. And then the conversation continues a little bit. I want to pause now for you guys to imitate that. If you want to start your story off with dialogue, that is a good format for you to get started with. Okay? I've also described a little bit of, not really much sensory language. I'm going to add a little sensory statement here. Tommy, the youngest of the tortoises, let's go here. Dolphia strained her tail fin and wiggled her body, causing her to torpedo toward the tortoises. The salty taste of the sea flooded her nostrils. I think dolphins have nostrils. Not a marine biologist. But here I've added a sensory feeling, the feeling of touch of the salt flooding into our nostrils. So I'm going to have the substitute teacher now pause the video so that you guys can imitate these steps, okay? Write a dialogue line. Somebody says something. Then just describe what's happening a little bit. Describe the actions of the characters. Try to describe an external trait and a sense as well, one of the 5 senses. Have some other character respond to your main character. Continue the conversation a little bit. It's calm, it's peaceful, it's the exposition. After you're done with that, the teacher will replay the video. He or she will click play on the video again, and then I will show you how to write a background paragraph that follows up your hook. Okay, pause and work. All right. After you do this little fun introduction, we're going to need a background paragraph, and that's where you really reveal the background of what's going on, what the setting is, get your reader totally comfortable with what the story is all about. Okay? So I'm going to write here that Princess Dolphia and Prince Dolpho were engaging in one of their favorite hobbies. chasing the tortoises, obviously, around the gates of the palace. And I want to give the reader a sense that everything's peaceful at first. So I want to say their father, King Dal Rodriguez, their father, King Dal Rodriguez, never minded that they swam so far from the palace gates. The seas had known nothing but peace for 100 years. 100 is a cool number for fantasy stories. It's just like, fantasy stories aren't scientific and they're not going to be very precise. It's just going to have kind of these sort of magical feeling numbers like that. The seas had known nothing but peace for 100 years. Still, Queen... Okay, what's the queen's name? How about Dolphessica, like Jessica. Dolphessica had grown nervous those past few moons. Instead of saying months, I'm going to say moons. Just gives it a magical feel for a fantasy story. There were whispers of darkness, there were whispers of darkness from the northern sea of a spreading legion of octopi. All right. Some of the background. You know the situation a little bit. The kids like to play outside of the palace. Usually that's safe. But there's a little bit of suspense because Queen Dolphessica is nervous about rumors about a legion of octopi that are coming from the northern sea. All right, so that's my exposition. That's all I really want you to draft today is the beginning, kind of the hook, dialogue, tell the reader something to visualize, continue the conversation, give a nice background paragraph that tells the reader what's going on. After that, you could probably throw in a one day, and here's where you can start writing your problem event. If you want to continue drafting, feel free, but this would be a good format to write the beginning of your story, the exposition. So everybody, the teacher's now going to be finished with the video, and your job will be, after you've begun the kind of opening hook of your story, to give a nice background paragraph, and then you could use a transition phrase like one day. Really, in this story, it shouldn't be one day, because I was already very zeroed in on what they were doing, so probably something more like, later that day, I want to introduce some sort of a problem that the whole story will be written about, okay? So, write your background paragraph, transition to your problem event, and keep drafting if you want. But next time I see you, in 2 weeks, I am going to be grading your entire pre-writing graphic organizer, and I will also be grading your hook and your background paragraph. Your exposition event needs to be all drafted, and that will receive a grade the next time I see you. All right, God bless you. See you next time. Bye.